The thing about Kang Yeonhee was that she had never in her 64 years on this earth done anything by accident. Not the way she arranged flowers, always peonies, always white, always in odd numbers because even numbers felt too resolved, too finished, and Yeonhee preferred things with room to grow. Not the way she dressed. Even in a hospital bed she had her housekeeper bring specific pieces, the champagne silk robe on Mondays and Thursdays, the dove gray cashmere set on the days she expected visitors, because a woman who had built herself from the inside out did not stop being intentional simply because she was attached to a drip. And certainly not the way she had called her son on day one of her admission and said, "I have met someone, come and see," which she had known, with the full confidence of a woman who had been reading people since before most of them were born, would bring him exactly where she needed him. The Pillow plan had come to her at approximately 11:47 p.m. on Wednesday, which she knew precisely because she had been doing exactly what Huda had told her not to do, reading with the lamp on, when the idea arrived fully formed the way the best ideas always did, not built but simply received, like a frequency she had finally tuned into. It was elegant in its simplicity. Huda had mentioned the recipe. Saiwon had listened to the mention of the recipe for 20 minutes more than a man who was not interested would have. Yeonhee needed the recipe written down. Writing a recipe down required explanation. Explanation required time. Time, in a hospital room with limited seating, required proximity. She had called Saiwon at 2 o'clock Thursday afternoon and told him to bring a notebook. A notebook, he had repeated, in the flat tone he used when he was trying to determine if she was serious. "For notes," she said. "I'm asking Huda to explain her mother's pillow recipe, and I want it written down properly. My memory isn't what it was." A pause. "Your memory is exceptional. You quoted a contract clause at me last month from a meeting that happened in 2019. That was business. This is cooking. Completely different part of the brain." She had paused. 2 o'clock, Saiwona. Bring a nice pen. Huda arrived for her afternoon round at 2:58 to find Kang Saiwon sitting in the chair beside his mother's bed with a slim leather notebook open on his knee, and an expression of a man who had fully committed to a situation he had walked into with his eyes open. She stopped in the doorway. She looked at the notebook. She looked at Yeonhee, who was sitting up with the brightness of a woman who had slept beautifully and had absolutely no ulterior motives whatsoever. She looked at Saiwon, who looked back at her with that careful expression and said, "She wants the pillow recipe." "I gathered," Huda said. "She said her memory isn't reliable for cooking. She quoted a 2019 contract clause last month." He pressed his lips together. "That's what I said." Yeonhee waved a hand between them. "Are you two going to discuss my memory, or are you going to teach me the recipe? I'm a patient. I have limited energy. Let's not waste it." Huda stood there for one more moment, taking in the scene, the notebook, the pen that was indeed very nice, the absolute unrepentant satisfaction radiating off Kang Yeon. He like a woman who had arranged all the furniture exactly where she wanted it. And then she walked in, pulled the second chair to the opposite side of the bed, sat down and said, "Fine, but we do vitals first." Yeonhee held out her arm immediately, which was the fastest she had ever cooperated with a medical procedure in 5 days. The pillow lesson lasted 40 minutes. It was, Huda would think later, both the most domestic and the most quietly charged 40 minutes she had experienced in recent memory, which was saying something because she had once talked a man through a cardiac event in an elevator and remained completely composed. Throughout, it started practically enough. She talked about the browning, the sugar, the heat, the specific color you waited for before you added the meat, that deep amber that her mother called the moment, the precise second between caramel and burnt that separated a good pillow from a great one. She talked about the pigeon peas, dried versus canned, the coconut milk ratio, the way her grandmother had added a whole Scotch bonnet without splitting it, just dropped it in whole so the heat was a rumor rather than a fact, present in the background, something you felt without being able to point to. She talked and she forgot, progressively, that Saiwon was writing any of it down. She forgot because Yeonhee kept asking questions, real questions, specific ones, the kind that came from genuine curiosity rather than polite performance. What did the moment look like exactly? What happened if you missed it? Did the coconut milk go in before or after the peas? Was there a version her mother made for celebrations versus a version for ordinary Tuesdays? And Huda answered, and somewhere in the answering she was not in room 412 anymore but in a kitchen in Port of Spain with yellow walls and a window that let in the afternoon heat and her mother standing at the stove in a house dressed the color of hibiscus, talking the whole time the way she always did when she cooked, narrating to no one and everyone, the food and the story inseparable from each other the way they always were at home. "She sounds extraordinary," Yeonhee said quietly at some point, Huda came back to the room. She looked at her hands. She made it look effortless. That was her whole thing. She made everything look like it cost her nothing. And then you tried to do it yourself and you understood exactly how much it cost. The room was very still. She looked up and found Siwon watching her. Pen paused above the notebook, the careful expression completely gone, replaced by something more unguarded than she had seen on him before, something that looked almost like recognition, like a man who knew something about the weight of people who made things look effortless. Their eyes held for a moment that was slightly too long to be accidental. Then Yeonhee said, "Write down the Scotch bonnet part. Siwon, you missed it." And the moment dissolved the way moments do when they're not ready to be named yet. Cleanly and without drama. And Siwon looked back at his notebook and Huda stood and said she needed to finish her round. She was at the nurse's station 7 minutes later, updating charts with the focused energy of a woman who was absolutely not replaying a moment in her head. When Nurse Choi Soyeon materialized on her left with the practiced casualness of someone who had been waiting for exactly this. "He was here again," Soyeon said. "His mother is a patient." Huda turned a page. "He comes every day now. Devoted son. It's admirable." Soyeon was quiet for a beat that had texture to it. The particular texture of a woman choosing her next words with the care of someone laying down cards. "He doesn't come at the same time every day." Huda looked up. "What?" "He comes," Soyeon gestured vaguely, "at different times, but he always seems to still be here when your afternoon round starts." She paused. "I've noticed." Huda looked at her for a long, level moment. Soyeon looked back with the expression of someone who thought they were delivering information when they were actually delivering a declaration. "That's interesting," Huda said pleasantly. "You know what else I've noticed?" Soyeon leaned in slightly. "You haven't updated Mrs. Park in 302's fluid chart since this morning." Huda tapped the stack of folders on the station. "That's a 4-hour gap. Head nurse Beck does her afternoon walk-in." She checked her watch. 11 minutes. She tilted her head. "You should probably go do that." Soyeon's expression collapsed through several stages before settling on something that was trying very hard to be dignified. She picked up the folders and walked away. From 2 stations down, Nurse on Solji, youngest on the floor, 24, perpetually terrified of Huda in a way that had recently begun tipping into admiration, made a sound that was quickly converted into a cough. Huda looked at her. Solji looked at her chart. "You can laugh," Huda said. "I won't tell anyone." Solji laughed. It was small and quickly suppressed, but it was real, and Huda filed it away. Another small private gift from a Wednesday that had turned out, despite everything, to be a fairly good one. She was changing out of her work shoes at 6:03 when her phone rang. Camille. Video call. Which meant she wanted to see Huda's face when she said whatever she was about to say, which was never a good sign. Huda answered. Camille's face filled the screen. Round, beautiful, edges laid with the precision of a woman who treated her appearance as both art and argument. Wearing a yellow oversized hoodie and the expression of someone who had been sitting on information all day. "Talk," Camille said. "Good evening to you too." Huda Celestine Baptiste. Camille leaned closer to the camera. "My source at Sungwon said he was there again today. With a notebook." Huda pulled on her second shoe. "Your source?" "Jini from radiology. She texts me." "Of course she does." "A notebook, Huda." "He brought a notebook. To a hospital visit." Camille's eyes were very wide. "Who brings a notebook to visit their sick mother?" "Someone who wanted to write down a recipe." Dead silence. Then, "A recipe." "His mother wanted the pillow." "His mother." Camille pressed both hands to her face. "Huda, baby, sweetheart, my oldest friend." She dropped her hands. "That man did not drive to a hospital in the middle of a Thursday to write down a rice recipe. It's not just rice, it's, I don't care what it is. Could be the recipe for eternal life and I would still be telling you that a billionaire Korean man with a full staff of personal chefs and housekeepers did not come to Sungwon Medical Center to take cooking notes." Camille sat back. "He came for you." Huda picked up her bag. "You're dramatic." "I'm accurate. There's a difference." Camille pointed at the camera. "What were you wearing?" "Scrubs." Camille. "I was at work." "Which color?" Huda paused. She had worn the dusty rose set today. a softer color than the teal, fitted differently, the kind of scrubs that had no business looking as good as they did but somehow did anyway. She had chosen them this morning without thinking about it, which was a thought she was choosing not to examine. Scrubs, she said again. Camille's eyes narrowed. Which color? Good night, Camille. Huda. She ended the call, dropped the phone in her bag, and walked out of the break room into the corridor, which was quiet and neutral and asked nothing of her, which she appreciated enormously. She was almost at the elevator when she heard footsteps behind her. She knew before she turned. She didn't know how she knew, some recalibration of the air, some frequency she had apparently already learned without meaning to. She turned anyway because not turning would have been its own kind of acknowledgement. Siwan was walking toward her, jacket back on now, the slim leather notebook tucked under his arm, looking like a man who had also just finished something and happened to be heading the same direction she was for entirely logistical reasons. Finished for the day? He asked, falling into step beside her with the ease of someone who had decided to stop making the coincidence awkward by acknowledging it. 6 o'clock, she said. Every day. Right? A beat. The Scotch bonnet, he said. You said whole, not split. But how whole? Like fully intact or? Huda looked at him. He was looking ahead, expression neutral, but there was something in the set of his jaw that was carefully not being a smile. Are you actually going to make the pillow? She said. My mother wants it. Your mother has a full kitchen staff. She wants me to make it. He glanced at her. She said it would mean more coming from family. Huda considered this. That is the most elaborately constructed sentence she has sent through you yet. He did smile then, brief, real, the kind that changed his whole face in a way she suspected very few people got to see. The Scotch bonnet, he said again. She sighed. Whole. Fully intact. You drop it in and you leave it alone. You don't touch it, you don't move it, you definitely don't split it open. You just let it exist in the pot and do its work quietly. He looked at her. That sounds like advice for more than cooking. It's a recipe, she said. Good night, Siwan. She stepped into the elevator. He didn't follow this time. Just stood at the corridor's end with his notebook and his almost smile, watching the doors close. She looked straight ahead at the mirrored doors. In her reflection, she looked composed. She looked like a woman who had said good night and meant it simply. She did not entirely believe her own reflection. Her phone buzzed. Camille. The dusty rose ones weren't they eyes. Huda put the phone face down in her bag. The elevator descended. Discharge day arrived on a Friday, which felt appropriate, Friday being the day things ended and other things began, the hinge of the week, the moment between what was and what comes next. Huda knew it was coming. She had charted it, anticipated it, prepared Yonhee's discharge notes with the same careful thoroughness she gave every patient. She had done this before, gotten attached in the quiet professional way that good nurses get attached to the people in her care, and then watched them leave restored and well, which was after all the entire point. She had done this before and she was good at it. She told herself this at 7:45 a.m. while putting on her scrubs. Deep plum today, fitted, her locks pinned in a style that sat higher than usual, structured and deliberate, the kind of look that meant business. And she believed it in the way that you believe sensible things before the day has had a chance to complicate them. Room 412 was different when she arrived. Not physically. The peonies were still there, the cashmere blanket still folded, the morning light still coming through the tall window in the same long strips it always did. But the energy was different, the way a room feels different when it knows it's about to be vacated, when the temporary nature of an arrangement becomes suddenly specifically real. Yonhee was dressed, not in the silk robes and cashmere sets of the past week, but in her going-home clothes, wide-leg trousers in winter white, a structured coat the color of raw silk, low-heeled boots in a cognac leather that were quietly expensive and loudly perfect. Her silver hair was pinned elegantly. She had pearl drop earrings on. She looked like herself, her full outside self, the version of her that existed in the world rather than in a hospital room, and the effect was both wonderful and slightly jolting, the way it always was when you saw someone restored to their full context. She looked up when Huda entered and her face did something complicated. You look well, Huda said, moving to the monitor for final readings. I feel well. Yonhee watched her work. Because of you. Because of Dr. Yoon's treatment plan and your own body's response to it. Because of you, Yonhee said again, firmly, in a tone that closed the debate. Huda made her final notes. Blood pressure excellent. Heart rate steady. All discharge markers met. She wrote with the methodical calm of a woman who was doing her job and not thinking about the fact that after today this would no longer be her patient and therefore no longer, technically, any of her concern in any official capacity whatsoever. I'm going to give you your discharge instructions, she said. You need to. I know the instructions. Yeonhee's voice was gentle. Saiwon already printed them. He highlighted the important parts. Huda looked up. He highlighted them. With a yellow highlighter. Very thoroughly. Something in Yeonhee's expression softened. He takes care of the things he thinks matter. The room was very quiet. Huda set down her tablet. She sat in the chair beside the bed. The chair she had sat in every day for 5 days, that had become, without her planning it, her chair, and she looked at Yeonhee and said, "You're going to be fine. Your numbers are strong. Just take the medication the way I told you, not the way you told me you were taking it before." Yeonhee laughed. "I will. And eat. Properly. Not just when someone is watching. I will. And sleep before midnight. I will try." "That's a no, but I'm noting it as a yes." Huda paused. "You have Dr. Yoon's follow-up in 2 weeks. Don't cancel it." "I won't." Yeonhee reached out and covered Huda's hand with hers. A gesture so natural and so maternal that Huda's breath caught somewhere in her chest before she could prepare for it. "You are a remarkable young woman," Yeonhee said quietly. "Your mother would be very proud." It was the specific combination of words, Huda thought later, that did it. Not any one of them alone but all of them together, in that order, from this woman, in this room that smelled of peonies and the particular warm, expensive scent that had become, over 5 days, simply the scent of Yeonhee. It was the fact that she had said your mother with the ease of someone who already knew her, already understood what that meant, already honored it without being asked. Huda did not cry. She was at work and she was a professional and she did not cry at work. But her hand turned over under Yeonhee's and held it back, just briefly, just for a moment, and something passed between them that didn't need language and wouldn't have been improved by it. "Call me," Huda said. "If anything feels off, any dizziness, any irregular heartbeat, any. I'll call you," Yeonhee said. "For all of those reasons and others." Saiwon arrived at 9. He came the way he always did, quietly, without announcement, taking up exactly the space he needed and no more. He was in a dark navy coat today, wool, beautifully cut, the kind of coat that looked like it had been made specifically for his shoulders, which it probably had. He had his mother's discharge bag in one hand and a coffee carrier in the other. 2 cups, which Huda clocked immediately from the nurse's station where she was completing paperwork. He set 1 cup on the counter in front of her without stopping. She looked at it. "Oat milk," he said, not looking back. "2 sugars. She told me." He walked toward room 412. Huda looked at the coffee cup. It was from the good place 3 blocks from the hospital, not the cafe in the lobby, which meant he had arrived early enough to go there first, which meant he had factored in the time, which meant, "Oh my God," said Nurse on Sulji very quietly, from 3 feet away, staring at the coffee cup. "Finish your chart, Sulji," Huda said. "He brought you." "Chart? Sulji." Sulji looked at her chart, but she was smiling at it, which was somehow worse. Huda picked up the coffee. It was the exact right temperature, not too hot, not cooled down, the temperature of something that had been timed carefully. She took a sip and it was exactly right, oat milk and 2 sugars, the way she had mentioned once, briefly, in passing, to Yeonhee, in a conversation she had not imagined anyone else was retaining. She set it down, picked up her pen, and finished her paperwork. The discharge process took 2 hours. Not because anything was complicated, but because Yeonhee moved at the pace of a woman who had decided to take her time, who stopped to speak to Dr. Yoon at length, who said careful, specific goodbyes to the 2 nurses she had tolerated, who paused in the corridor to examine a floral arrangement near the elevator with the focused attention of someone who was not quite ready for the door. Huda walked with them to the elevator. This was not standard discharge procedure. She did it anyway. At the elevator, Yeonhee turned to her one final time, and before Huda could do anything professional or measured or properly boundaried, she was enveloped in a hug that was full and warm and entirely without self-consciousness. The hug of a woman who had decided something and was expressing it physically because words, for once, were not quite enough. Huda hugged her back. She smelled of that warm, expensive scent and something softer underneath it, something that Huda's chest recognized before her brain did, something that felt, quietly, dangerously, beautifully, like the specific warmth of someone's mother. She let go first because she had to, because the elevator was there and the day was continuing and there were 4 other patients on her floor who needed her. Yeonhee held her at arm's length for one moment, looked at her face with those sharp dark eyes, and nodded once, small, satisfied, the nod of a woman confirming something she already knew. Then she stepped into the elevator. Siwon had been standing slightly back through all of this, giving them space, which she noticed and which told her something about him that the charcoal jackets and the leather notebooks and the perfectly timed coffee had all been suggesting. He moved to follow his mother into the elevator and then stopped, just at the threshold, and turned back. "Thank you," he said, "for taking care of her." It was simple, completely sincere. No architecture around it. "That's my job," Huda said. "Not the way you did it." He looked at her steadily. "That wasn't just your job." The elevator doors began to close. "The Scotch bonnet," she said, because she needed to say something and that was what came out. He caught the doors with one hand, holding them a moment. "What about it? Don't forget to remove it before you serve. Hole in, hole out." She paused. "Don't let it burst." He looked at her for one long moment with that expression she had never quite been able to categorize. Not quite a smile, not quite something else, something balanced and careful and entirely his own. "I won't," he said. The doors closed. Huda stood at the elevator for approximately 4 seconds longer than necessary. Then she turned around and walked back to her floor. Behind the nurse's station, Nurse on Sulji was looking very hard at a chart that Huda was almost certain she had already finished. "Not a word," Huda said. "I didn't say anything," Sulji said. "Not a word, Sulji." Completely silent. Sulji agreed, and went back to her chart with a smile. She was doing absolutely nothing to hide. Camille was sitting on the hood of a car outside the hospital entrance at 6:07 p.m. Not her car, just a car, because Camille had the specific confidence of a woman who believed all flat surfaces were available seating. In a rust-colored leather jacket and high-waisted jeans and boots that had no business being that tall on a Friday evening outside a medical building. Scrolling her phone with the patience of someone who had been there a while and had decided to make it an event. She looked up when Huda came through the doors. "She left today," Camille said. "Yes." Huda fell into step beside her as Camille slid off the car. And she's discharged. She's well. It's a good outcome." Camille looked at her sideways as they walked. "And the son came to collect her, as sons do. Did he say anything?" Huda was quiet for half a block. "He brought me coffee," she said finally. "Oat milk, 2 sugars. From the good place." Camille stopped walking. Huda kept walking. Camille jogged 2 steps to catch up. "He knew your order. His mother told him. His mother told him your coffee order, and he went 3 blocks out of his way before a hospital visit to get it right." Camille grabbed her arm. "Huda, I'm walking, Camille." "Huda Celestine Baptiste. Stop walking and look at me." Huda stopped. She turned. Camille was looking at her with the expression she reserved for moments of what she called intervention by friendship. Direct, warm, entirely without mercy. "You like him," Camille said. "I don't know him." "You like him," Camille said again, with the serenity of someone stating a fact that does not require the other person's confirmation to be true. The sole evening was cooling around them, the street busy with the particular Friday energy of a city shifting from work to something else. Lights beginning to matter more than they did an hour ago. The air carrying the faint thread of food from somewhere nearby, and Huda stood in the middle of it and thought about a man who had brought a notebook to a hospital and timed a coffee perfectly, and said that wasn't just your job with no agenda attached to it. "He's my former patient's son," she said. "Former," Camille noted. "As of today." A pause. "He's going to call," Camille said. "Not a prediction. A verdict." Huda started walking again. "You don't know that." "I know that." Camille fell into step beside her. "And so do you. And when he does," she pointed at her, "you're going to answer." Huda said nothing, which was, as Camille had learned over many years of friendship, a very specific kind of answer. The first call came on Sunday. Not from Siwon, from Yeonhee at 10:14 in the morning. While Huda was in her kitchen in Mapogu making actual coffee in the unhurried way she only made it on days off. Slowly, with intention, standing at the counter in an oversized cream linen set, locks loose, the Sunday quietness of her apartment a thing she actively protected and enjoyed. She looked at the name on her phone. She had given Yeonhee her number on day 2. This had been technically outside standard protocol. She had done it anyway because Yeonhee had looked at her during a particularly good conversation and said, "In case I need medical advice after hours," with such specific innocence that Huda had put the number in her phone before she'd fully decided to. She answered, "Good morning, Mrs. Kong." "Yeonhee," said Yeonhee firmly. "We discussed this." They had not, in fact, discussed this, but Huda let it stand. "Good morning, Yeonhee. How are you?" "It's my day off. I'm making coffee." "I'm excellent." She poured the water slowly. "How are you feeling? Any dizziness? Heart palpitations?" "None. I slept wonderfully. I had the most beautiful dream about Palo, which I think means you should make it for me sometime." Pause, perfectly weighted. "I'm calling because I found a market near Gyeongbokgung. Tuesday mornings, small, beautiful produce. A woman who sells the most extraordinary dried herbs. I thought you might want to come." Huda poured her coffee. "You want me to come to a market with you? I want company. Saiwin is busy on Tuesdays. My friends all have their own schedules." Another pause. "And I want to find coconut milk for the palo. I thought you could help me choose the right kind." "Any full-fat coconut milk will do, Yeonhee. But which brand? There are so many brands." The innocence was extraordinary. It was, Huda thought, a work of art. "Tuesday at 10? I'll send a car. I can take the metro." "The car is already happy to come. It has nothing else to do Tuesday morning." Huda stood in her kitchen in the Sunday quiet and looked at her coffee and thought about a woman who had called her on a Sunday morning under the pretense of coconut milk brands and felt, despite everything, the specific warmth of being wanted somewhere by someone who had decided, without making a production of it, that she belonged. 10 o'clock, she said. "But I'm taking the metro." "The car will follow at a respectful distance," Yeonhee said, and hung up. The market was everything Yeonhee had promised and several things she hadn't mentioned. It was small and slightly chaotic in the way of good markets everywhere. Tucked into a street that felt like it was keeping a secret, stalls crowded close together selling things that ranged from the practical to the inexplicable. Huda arrived at 10:05 in wide-leg indigo trousers and a fitted camel turtleneck. Her locks half up and held back with a sculptural clip in brushed gold. Her coat a deep forest green wool that she had bought on a good day and worn on good days since. She looked, Yeonhee told her immediately upon seeing her, exactly like someone who should always be at markets. "I look like someone who woke up and got dressed," Huda said. "That's what I said." Yeonhee linked her arm through Huda's with the ease of someone who had decided physical familiarity was happening, and there was no further discussion required. She was in a camel coat herself, long, structured, belted, and cream-wide leg trousers, pearl studs, low boots. They walked, Huda realized, with the same energy, unhurried, deliberate, like two women who had somewhere to be and had decided it was here. They looked at dried herbs. They argued pleasantly about coconut milk brands. Huda chose. Yeonhee deferred with the grace of someone getting exactly what she wanted. They stopped at a stall selling persimmons and Yeonhee bought 6 without consulting the price, which told Huda everything she needed to know about the casual ease of old money. They ate tiak from a paper bag while walking, which was the kind of thing that felt small and was not small at all. "Tell me about Trinidad," Yeonhee said, mid-tiak. "What about it?" "Everything. What does it look like? What does it sound like?" She looked at Huda with genuine hunger for the answer. "I've never been to the Caribbean." Huda thought about how to compress an entire island into something sayable. "It's loud," she said finally. "Not unpleasantly. Just it's a loud place. Music from somewhere always. The light is very specific. Not just bright but warm, the kind of warmth that has weight to it, like it's touching you back when it hits your skin." She paused. "The colors are completely unapologetic. Nothing is muted because nobody agreed that things should be muted. Buildings in pink and yellow and turquoise just sitting next to each other like it's completely sensible." Yeonhee was listening with her whole face. "And the people? Opinion on everything. Strong ones. Delivered directly and without apology, usually while also offering you food." Huda smiled. "We're a people who believe that disagreeing with you and feeding you are not mutually exclusive activities." Yeonhee laughed. That real laugh, the young one. "I would fit in perfectly. You would start a dynasty in about 3 weeks. 4, Yeonhee said modestly, and bought 2 more persimmons. They were at a stall examining a frankly excessive array of dried chilies when Huda felt rather than heard someone arrive beside her. A shift in the specific gravity of the space, a presence that the air reorganized itself around. She did not look up immediately. "You said you were busy on Tuesdays," Yonhi said, to someone on Huda's right, with the blameless tone of a woman whose plans had worked out exactly as intended. "A meeting moved," Siwen said. Huda looked up. He was in a long dark coat, charcoal wool, a cream knit underneath, no tie, looking like someone who had come from somewhere important and stopped caring about it the moment he arrived here. He was holding a paper cup, too, she realized. He held one out to her. She looked at it. "Oat milk," he said. "2 sugars." "You have to stop doing that," she said, taking it. "Which part?" "The part where you know things." Something moved in his expression. That small, private shift she was beginning to recognize as his version of a wider smile. "My mother talks." "Your mother engineers," Huda said. From Huda's left, Yonhi made a sound of sublime innocence while examining a dried chili she had absolutely no culinary use for. They walked, all 3 of them, through the rest of the market, past the persimmon stall and the herb woman and a man selling handmade ceramics that Yonhi stopped at for a long time. Siwen fell into step beside Huda in the natural way of something that had already been decided. They talked, not profoundly, not with the weight of anything that needed to mean something yet, just the easy conversation of people who were finding, incrementally and without making a point of it, that talking to each other was effortless in a way that talking to most people was not. He asked about the dried chilies. She explained the difference between Scotch bonnet and habanero with the patient authority of someone who grew up understanding that getting this wrong mattered. He listened with the focused attention of a man who was genuinely interested rather than performing interest, which she noticed and which she wished she didn't notice because noticing it meant she was paying attention in a way she hadn't fully authorized herself to yet. "You cook a lot?" he asked. "It's how I stay connected," she said. "To home. To her." She didn't explain who her was. He didn't ask, which meant he already knew, and knowing that he already knew meant Yonhi had told him, and Yonhi telling him meant he had been asking, and Huda filed that entire chain of logic somewhere she would examine later when she was alone and had the luxury of being honest with herself. "You should teach me," he said. "Not my mother wants to know or she'd love that. Just you should teach me. Direct. Personal." His own sentence. Huda looked at him. He looked back. Steady, no performance. Just a man saying what he meant and waiting to see what she'd do with it. "We'll see," she said, which was not a no. They both knew it was not a no. Ahead of them, Yonhi had found the ceramic stall's most elaborate piece. A wide, beautiful bowl in a deep slate blue with gold at the rim, and was examining it with the expression of a woman making an investment. "For the pillow," she announced when they caught up. "When Huda makes it, it should be served in something worthy." "I haven't agreed to make it," Huda said. "You haven't disagreed," Yonhi said, and handed the bowl to Siwen to carry. He took it without complaint because apparently this was simply who he was. A man who carried his mother's market purchases and brought precisely timed coffees and wrote pillow recipes in leather notebooks and looked at a woman like she was a question he had already decided was worth every complicated answer. Huda looked at the street ahead, at the market thinning toward its edges, at the soul morning doing what soul mornings did. Existing loudly and beautifully and without apology, not unlike a small Caribbean island she knew. She drank her coffee. It was, as always, exactly right. He asked her on a Thursday, not through his mother, though Yonhi had laid enough groundwork in the preceding 2 weeks that the ask, when it came, felt less like a beginning than a confirmation of something already in motion. Not through a text which she might have been able to process at a safe distance. In person, at the end of a Tuesday market visit that had turned into a Thursday walk through Buckshin that had turned into standing outside a restaurant neither of them had planned to stop at, looking at a menu in the window in the particular way of 2 people who are both thinking the same thing and waiting to see who says it first. "Dinner," he said. "Friday. Just us." She looked at the menu. Bibimbap, 3 varieties. A seasonal special. A wine list. "Your mother's not invited?" she said. "My mother has plans Friday." A pause. "I checked." Huda looked at him. "You checked." "I wanted to be sure. Completely even. No apology for it." She thought about Camille, who had said you're going to answer with the certainty of a prophet. She thought about her mother, who had said you walk in like the space was already yours. She thought about a woman in a hospital bed who had looked at her on day 1 and seen something she recognized, and had spent 3 weeks very quietly, very deliberately, building a bridge between two people who had not yet admitted they wanted to cross it. Friday, she said. He nodded. That was all. No overstatement, no performance. Just the acknowledgement of a man who had asked for something specific and received it and understood the value of not cluttering the moment. The restaurant was in Jongno, small, private, the kind of place that existed in the particular Seoul tradition of extraordinary food in rooms that didn't announce themselves from the outside. She wore wide-leg trousers in a deep chocolate brown, a fitted sleeveless top in ivory silk, and a structured blazer in cognac leather that had cost her 3 months of careful saving, and was worth every single one. Her locks were down, loose, the way she wore them when she was being herself most completely. Small gold hoops, a single bracelet, nothing else because nothing else was needed. She arrived at 7 on the dot because she was a woman who arrived on time. He was already there, which meant he had arrived early, which meant something she chose to hold lightly rather than examine directly just yet. They were given a table in a corner, private without being conspicuous, the kind of table that suggested whoever had made the reservation understood what kind of evening this was. She noted this without commenting on it. He noticed her noting it without commenting on that. They ordered. They talked. And the talking, this was the thing she had not entirely prepared herself for, was easy in a way that dinner conversation was not always easy, the way conversation is easy when it's happening between two people who are both genuinely interested in the other's interior world rather than the performance of it. He talked about his father, not at length, not with the practiced summary of someone who had told the story many times, but in the specific way of someone who trusted her with the unedited version. A man who had built something from very little and had never, in Siwon's memory, acted like that was remarkable. Who had laughed loudly at his own jokes, which were never as funny as he thought, and who had loved Yeonhee with the specific public tenderness of a man who didn't care who knew it. She misses him differently now, Siwon said. Not less, just differently, like she's made a separate piece with it that doesn't make it smaller but makes it livable. Huda was quiet for a moment. That's exactly what it is, she said. You don't stop missing them. You just get better at carrying it without dropping everything else. He looked at her. Your mother. My mother. A silence. Warm, not empty. She would have liked you, Huda said, surprising herself slightly with the certainty of it. She had a thing about people who meant what they said. It was her highest criteria for a person. She looked at her glass. She would have said you were good people. Capital G, capital P. That was her phrase. Covered a lot. Good people, he said, like he was trying the phrase for weight. Means honest. Means present. Means you don't perform kindness, you just do it. She looked at him. It's a high bar. Am I? He left it open. Not fishing. Actually asking. I don't give out my mother's categories casually, she said. But yes. She picked up her glass. You're getting there. He smiled, the full one, the rare one, the one that changed his whole face, and she felt it land somewhere in her chest with the specific certainty of something settling into a place it had been looking for. They stayed until the restaurant began its gentle, ambient communication that it was approaching closing, the slight dimming of peripheral lights, the discreet reduction of background music, the way the remaining staff moved with the particular choreography of people who were too professional to say please leave and too tired to continue pretending time wasn't passing. Outside, the Jongno night was cool and busy, the street alive with the particular Friday energy of a city that took its weekends seriously. They stood on the pavement in the way of two people who were not ready for the evening to resolve, but had not yet decided what it resolved into. I'm going to tell you something, he said, and I want you to know I've thought about whether to say it. She looked at him. Okay. I came to the hospital the first time because of her message. He paused. I kept coming because of you. It was not something I planned. She was quiet. I'm not saying that to put pressure on anything, he continued. I'm saying it because you're a person who I think deserves to know when something is true, rather than finding out. Around the edges of it. The Seoul night moved around them. Taxis, distant music, a group of people laughing on the opposite pavement. The city doing what cities did while the specific moment happening on this particular pavement remained entirely its own. My mother engineered this, Huda said. Completely, he agreed. The notebook, the market, the moved meeting, all of it. She's been running this since day one. He said it with the fond, slightly rueful affection of a man who had been outmaneuvered by an expert and had the grace to appreciate it. She called her best friend the night you met and said she'd found her daughter-in-law. Huda's eyes widened. She did not. She absolutely did. He tilted his head slightly. She's not wrong about many things. Huda looked at this man, this careful, direct, quietly attentive man who had come to a hospital with a leather notebook and brought precisely timed coffee and asked a woman to dinner without hiding behind his mother's scheming even while acknowledging it fully, and felt the thing she had been holding at arm's length since a Tuesday morning in teal scrubs simply stop cooperating with the distance. I'm not agreeing to be anyone's daughter-in-law, she said. We're at dinner. Let's be at dinner. Agreed, he said immediately. Dinner. And whatever comes after dinner, she said. Comes after dinner, not before. Completely reasonable. Your mother is going to be insufferable when she finds out we like each other. She already knows, he said. She's known since the pillow. Huda laughed. A real one. Full, the kind her mother would have recognized. Of course she has. He smiled. They began walking. Not toward anything specific, just into the soul night, side by side, at the unhurried pace of two people who had, quietly and without making a ceremony of it, arrived somewhere they had both been heading without knowing the address. In Gangnam, in a house full of white peonies and cashmere, and the specific satisfaction of a woman who had gotten exactly what she prayed for. Kang Yeon, he put down her book, looked at her phone, and typed to her oldest friend. It's done. He took her to Jongyo. She laughed. I know because he never stays out past 10 on Fridays and it's 10:47. She set the phone on the nightstand. 2 weeks, she had said. She had done it in 3. She turned off the lamp, pulled up the cashmere blanket, and closed her eyes with the deep, uncomplicated peace of a woman who had loved well, lost greatly, and found, in a hospital room on an ordinary Tuesday, something that felt, quietly and certainly, like more love arriving right on time.
Basically, in this story, we learned that the right people love doesn't announce itself. It shows up in small, quiet things: a perfectly timed coffee, a notebook that had nothing to do with cooking, a Tuesday market that was never coincidence, and by the time you notice, it's already been there a while. The people meant for you have a way of finding the door even before you decide to open it. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe, and share.